Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics Football here. It's Fran, and I'm going to be looking at a different video. It's not going to be limitless for Matchday 2 or Matchday 3, but rather a discussion about how to use the wildcard pick, for Matchday 3. This is likely to be only kind of relevant to someone who played limitless in Matchday 2, and therefore is kind of looking for an advantage over their opponents who might be looking to play the wildcard later in the playoffs. I think the key kind of two stages where you want to use the wild card is here in match day 3, given the fact that a lot of teams are rotating, Netherlands being a key example, or even Italy, where Mancini has mentioned that he's going to rotate his team. This is largely given the fact that I think some teams like Netherlands have absolutely nothing to play for, and a team like Italy, I think, fancies their chances or don't see better seeding necessarily if they go out first or second place in the group, right? And for me, I think what's interesting is here you have a chance to pick a lot of players that are likely not going to be in people's teams, given the fact that they probably sculpted a team with super favorites, right? So maybe Netherlands players who are no longer going to play. And here's an opportunity for you to play even some of the bench players from some of the top teams. So, for example, Italy or Netherlands. And I think that's what I've done here. And I've tried to also go for some kind of differentials here that I think will kind of bring our team into a very good position, I think, heading into the playoffs where you kind of get that reset once again. Now, just looking at the context of match day 2, I think a lot of things happened that weren't expected necessarily. I think, France, for example, drawing, Portugal losing so heavily to Germany have kind of changed the way we kind of want to sculpt our wild card, and I think that's why this video has come out a little bit later than possible. The idea behind this wildcard video is less to kind of give you an overall kind of crop of players where you can pick from, but rather I think just to kind of keep it down to budget. Given the fact that we have 100 million right now, we want to be making sure that we kind of spend every kind of penny, in the right place. And I think I've tried to create a team, and I'll try to explain the best options going forward. And I'm going to start with the front here. So Yaremchuk is going to be my kind of first forward that I'm going to play with, because first of all, Yaremchuk is a player who's shown, over the course of this tournament that when it comes to Ukraine scoring goals, he's part and parcel to it. He's had the most shots on target for Ukraine by far. And whilst I've recommended Yarmolenko matchday 2, which really paid off, it doesn't hurt to go for both. And we've seen, in the last 2 match days that both have done extremely well for Ukraine. And I don't see any point now that, for example, some of the key forwards in this tournament might not play in match day 3, why Yaremchuk isn't a great option here. Because I think, for example, in terms of people comparable in this price range, we're talking about Jujuba, and we're talking about Isaac from Sweden. And, both these teams play for very defensive teams that don't really create many chances, whereas Ukraine is a team that I think actually do play on the front foot and play aggressively, and are also going to be playing versus a Austrian side that have a lot to play for, right? Because Austria have 3 points, Ukraine themselves have 3 points, and both teams I think are going to attack so that they can actually, make sure that they kind of progress in the tournament. And I think those two are reasonable picks at their prices as well. Now, moving forwards, I think you have someone who plays in day 1 of match day 3. It's going to be Mbolo. Mbolo is someone who I think when it comes to Switzerland is their kind of key attacking player. He was someone who carried the attack versus Wales and really should have actually led Switzerland to the full 3 points. But he was also let down by kind of misses from Seferovic and also Mbabu, as well as the chance that he kind of scuffed himself. But I think he is the kind of talismanic figure, and he's also playing versus one of the worst defenses in the tournament in Turkey. So I think Mbolo is a fantastic pick here in this tournament. And I think it's great to have a player, or a forward at least, in each and every different day. So I think Mbolo here makes sense, and he could be a potential captaincy pick. Now for me, my captaincy pick is actually going to be Ricardo Rodriguez to start the tournament out. Because Ricardo Rodriguez is Switzerland's key chance creator. Now, you're probably thinking it might be Shaqiri, but Shaqiri hasn't had a great tournament so far, nor has he shown great performances that we've come to expect from him, even on a domestic level, right? And I think you can't kind of gamble on the fact that Shaqiri is going to somehow come out in game 3 and pop off. And I think you have to kind of look into the consistency of, I think, Ricardo Rodriguez so far in this tournament, as well as Mbolo. And I think for that reason, those two are the only picks that I'd ever touch really from that kind of Switzerland-Turkey game. Moving forwards, I think the other game you have in match day 1 is going to be Italy versus Wales. For me, I think Bale's actually surprised me in the sense that he actually got so many chances off of Turkey. And largely that's due to the fact that Turkey is a very, very poor defense. And I don't expect Bale to have so many opportunities versus an Italian defense, even if it is heavily rotated. Now, the rotation in Italy is obviously going to impact them. And I think um, whilst they have been great at keeping clean sheets, it's not 100% certain, but I do think Italian players are actually still very much priced well, at this stage in the tournament. And whilst I think that Insigne and Berardi might not play, they might be rotated. As I mentioned, that Mancini definitely mentioned that there will be rotations. I think Chiesa therefore makes a kind of good midfield selection pick. And as most managers would do, I think you don't really touch your keeper, even if you're rotating your squad. And I think Donnarumma becomes a good pick for me for that very reason as well. Chiesa is someone who's filled in for Insigne a couple of times, but he can also play on the right where Berardi has been playing. And he's been a great kind of figurehead for Juventus this season, at least in the early first half of the season. And I think he has the potential to score versus a Welsh defense that also are quite open. I think, Turkey didn't really challenge them, they didn't really challenge them, but I think, Switzerland did. And I think Switzerland aren't exactly a fantastic team themselves, just off of watching Switzerland's latest performance versus Italy. And for that reason, I think if we go ahead, we now have to kind of round out our team with players from, let's say, the Netherlands team, just for some sort of kind of like punt, right? Because this is a key chance for the Dutch players who haven't necessarily started games under Frank de Boer's kind of first two match days to kind of prove themselves or redeem themselves. Now, Wijndal, I think, is a good option, but then I think when a team doesn't have anything to play for, you can't really you don't really think it's certain that they're going to keep a clean sheet. Whereas I do think that they have the opportunity to attack because they're very hungry, right, to prove themselves. And I think Malen is someone who showed that he was, I think, someone who has potential, I think, as a future star. But he showed it, in the game versus Austria. And his kind of assist to Dumfries was exactly what we were looking for, a kind of selfless forward who looks to attack, has a lot of pace in behind, and I think he can bring that to the table versus a North Macedonia side who are very weak defensively, in my opinion, and actually also look to attack. And North Macedonia will have to attack because they have 0 points right now. So I think Malen is a great pick, and I don't think I would touch a Dutch defender for the same reason that I mentioned that Zinchenko wasn't a good pick in matchday 2. Now, another pick that I didn't select in matchday 2 that actually did very well was Perisic, and I think historically, when you look at Perisic in tournaments, he's been kind of Croatia's talismanic figure in terms of scoring goals. Modric is probably the kind of key player in terms of actually organizing and controlling the team, but Perisic is there leading the lines in a sense. And I think Rebic is another potential player, but I think Rebic, it doesn't necessarily play towards the style of Croatia, nor does Croatia play towards the style of Rebic, someone who actually looks to run in behind and actually, challenge defenses on his own off the back of, let's say, someone who's holding a central position like Zlatan. Perisic is someone who can score on his own, and I think for that reason, in a game where they have to, it's pretty much a must-win game versus Scotland, I do see Perisic scoring for Croatia. Kevin De Bruyne is someone I featured in my Matchday 2 Limitless selection, and someone I think that everyone has to look at because he's had limited minutes in this tournament so far, but in his limited minutes, he's been perhaps the best player in the tournament. And that shows you, first of all, the class of Kevin De Bruyne, but also what he can bring to the table in matchday 3 when he's playing versus a Finland side. This Finland side have been quite good defensively, but simply put, so have Denmark, I think, over the course of the last 4 years. And Kevin De Bruyne showed why he's a difference maker versus any sort of defense. And I think for that reason, you can't really avoid the chance of punting versus him. The other option would have been Eden Hazard, but I still think Eden Hazard plays in a much deeper position than he usually does, and for that reason, I haven't really touched Eden Hazard. Moving forwards, I think I'm going to look at my defenders, and I mentioned that Denmark are a very, very good defensive team, and for that reason, I do have Mala and Schmeichel. Now, of course, Denmark have conceded in both their match days, and I think the first game really comes down to a really unfortunate event that I think, fortunately, Eriksen has recovered from. And, the second match day really comes down to the brilliance of Kevin De Bruyne and nothing else. As well as, obviously, the attacking brilliance as well of Lukaku. And I don't think Russia really bring that to the table, right? Djouba is a good forward, but, he plays in a very traditional centre-forward mold. He can kind of hold up play well. But that wasn't what was necessary for Belgium to actually score versus Denmark. It took a lot more from Lukaku, holding the ball down the wings, waiting for Kevin De Bruyne to kind of split open the defense, or waiting for Belgium to kind of play these kind of pinpoint passes. And I think if you watch Russia play over the course of this tournament, they haven't really shown that. I think it's been an individual brilliance by Miranchuk to kind of win the previous game versus Finland. And, I'm not really that interested in, I think, Russia's attacking returns. They also lost one of their key players, Mario Fernandez, and I think for that reason, Denmark and their defense is very interesting to look at. So that's why I've gone for Mala and Schmeichel. Mala being a little bit more of an attacking player than Kjaer, their captain. John Stones, for me, has been one of the best central defenders in this tournament, and also over the course of his fantasy season for the Premier League has been an attacking threat constantly. And I think for that reason, he's a pick that I would like to have, given the fact that I think England are good for a clean sheet, but not necessarily have found their kind of attacking structure. So for that reason, I think John Stones is a solid pick. Now, my last three picks are still very much determined by what exactly happened yesterday, right? We had a fantastic game from Germany, them showcasing the kind of brilliancy of their attack in full potential versus Portugal, a side that played extremely narrow and I think struggled to kind of utilize their midfielders to support their fullbacks. And I think for that reason, Gosens really shone. And I mean, fundamentally, Gosens is a player who's very good in playing a five at the back structure, right? In Atalanta, he's one of the kind of key contributors to their attack, and I think his attacking returns, whether in the German national team or whether in Atalanta, can't be understated. I think he is a fantastic player and pretty much is a tried and true left winger for the German side. And Hungary have to really, really fight for their tournament hopes here. They have to go through all 3 points because that's the only way they really progress, right? And for this reason, I think Gosens is a fantastic pick, and Havertz as well. Both these players show that they're completely instrumental to the attacks of Germany. I think Gosens was very much on the end of a lot of balls, and if it wasn't Gosens, it was Havertz. Havertz was someone who was connecting play, kind of playing almost as a false nine at times, and then found himself, in front of the near post, in the right position, pretty much in the entire of the second half versus Portugal. And I think for that reason, Havertz becomes a very good pick. Gnabry as well is another pick that I think a lot of people would have considered for Germany. But unfortunately, things haven't really fallen into his plate, even though he's had the chances. But I think Havertz is continuing to grow. And I think if you look at his form in Chelsea, the last kind of 6 games, he scored 4 goals. And he's really only built on this in this tournament. And I round out the team with a 4.5 defender, and it's going to be Pau Torres. Now, Spain, of course, just conceded versus Poland, and that's not a very promising sign, but I think the fact that Sweden were able to keep a clean sheet versus Slovakia, and Slovakia's, I think, somewhat dismal performance versus Sweden actually showed the true kind of potential of Slovakia, because I think if you look at Poland's kind of run through this tournament, they've only slowly improved. I think they started very, very poorly in the first 45 minutes versus Slovakia, and then we're kind of unfortunate to have a red card, which meant that things once again turned sour for them. But Slovakia, I think, have some good winger threats, but Hamšík is no longer the kind of player that he once was, and I think that kind of central attacking threat is no longer there. And I think, Spain will have to kind of fight tooth and nail, but they're still, once again, a very solid defense, and I think for that reason, it's not a bad idea to kind of maybe hedge on the fact that I think Spain have a good opportunity here to get a clean sheet and stick with Pau Torres. And that's how I picked my wildcard team and spent my 100 million euros. If you guys have any questions about some of these players, or if you want to kind of rotate some players, feel free to ask me. But this is my team for Matchday 3, going for the wildcard. Let me know how you guys think about the team, and hope you guys, wish you guys good luck for Matchday 3. And if you choose to use the wild card later, then that's all power to you. We'll definitely be making tournament videos about that in the future, even if you've held on to your wild card. So stay seated.